Hi and welcome back to my channel. I'm Simon and today I'm going to have a chat with you about 12 books that I was going to say I meant to read this year, but I'm actually quite shocked that I haven't got to this year because at some point I have been really desperate to read all of these books, and actually I will say it's 14, but there are 2 that I might get to before the end of the year. I say might because I won't lie, my reading has really slowed down and I almost feel like I'm sort of done for 2024, which sounds very dramatic, but I'm definitely like heading more towards watching TV, films, sort of, there's lots of festive stuff going on, and I think also explains why I never get around to reading all those festive books that I mentioned in the last video, which I'll link down below if you missed it. But yeah, I thought I would not exactly have a word with myself or I was going to say out myself, woo, but I just thought I'd kind of, go through the books and why I was excited for them and why maybe I haven't got to them yet, although I don't really have any majorly justifiable reasons apart from maybe work reads have got in the way, maybe I'm a contrary fairy as we've talked about before. I don't like a TBR. As soon as I sort of say something on the top of my TBR, I go right off the idea because contrary fairy. I've said it before, I'll say it again, possibly even in this video. So the 2 that I'm going to mention first, and I have put all these books in alphabetical order, so it's quite random, but also sort of fortuitous that these 2 authors' surnames both begin with A. And the 2 that I feel like maybe I could squeeze in before the end of the year are Martyr by Kaveh Akbar and Dusk by Robbie Arnott. Now, Martyr is a book that I've heard amazing things about all year and have really meant to get to. And the reason that I didn't was because when I was in the mood, I had just read You're Dead by Sam Sachs, and I've heard they both have some quite similar themes within them, done very differently, but similar themes. So it just felt like maybe it wasn't the right time, but I would, if I can, like to get to this before the end of the year because I feel like it could be a favourite. But I will also say, and that's what's slightly putting me off reading Dusk by Robbie Arnott, I've found it so hard to make a top. Let's say I'm going to go for 12, might be 15 books of the year so far. These 2 could disrupt that massively, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. Plus, there has been times where I've not put books that I've read towards the end of a year on my favourites because I feel like maybe they need time to grow, but that's also kind of a silly rule. Anyway, Dusk by Robbie Arnott is one of the books that I've most anticipated all year. It's not out in the UK yet. I had this imported from Australia. And as soon as it arrived, I was like, I'm desperate to read it. And I do this stupid thing of, oh, right, well, I'll put it up to the beginning of December because that's a new month. And then I'll use December as a month to read all the books that I meant to read this year. We're now on the, what day is it today? 10th of December as I'm filming this, although this go live on the 12th. 12 is my favourite number, just so you know. I don't know why I'm mentioning that, but I am. I'm digressing. But yeah, so I have kept putting it off and now I'm like, oh, maybe this should be the first book I read in 2025 because, as many of you may know if you've been around for a while, I do have a real superstition around the first book that I read in a new year. And I think it was actually at the end of last year that I read Robbie's previous book, Limberlost, and it's sort of, ironic to its title, got lost in that sort of betwixtmas period where it was a book that I really loved and should have been a favourite, but it didn't quite make a favourite. And maybe I'm thinking what I should have done with that book is hold it off to the beginning of the year, so maybe that's why I'm doing that with this. Maybe I'm overthinking it all, but there we go. Those are the 2 that I'm hoping I will get to before the end of the year. If I don't, I don't. I'm not going to beat myself up about it. It's just books after all. I know it's more than just books, okay, I know. But also it is just books. So on to the 12 that I don't think I will get to before the end of this year. And I think what I may do is, with the exception of one that's already out in paperback, wait until the paperback editions of them come out and sort of read them around that point, maybe. But there's me putting rules on things. And what am I going to do now that I've said that? I'll fight against that rule. I know myself all too well. What a minx. Right, so first up, and these are, as I said, all in alphabetical order of author surname, we have Babylonia by Costanza Casati, and I read her debut novel, Clytemnestra, I can't believe it, I think it was 2 years ago, and absolutely loved it. That was one of my favourite books that year. I just thought it was such a brilliant, realist, fabulous retelling of Clytemnestra's life through the Greek myths that sort of intermingled with all of them, and yet kind of kept gods and stuff a little bit in the background. I just thought it was wonderful, and I've been super duper excited to read this. It's stunning. Let's just focus on that for a second. But yeah, I haven't got around to it, and I'm really quite annoyed with myself for it. But I do have a thing with authors where I have loved their debut novel, or indeed just loved all of their works that I've read so far, where I get super duper excited about their latest book, and then as soon as I have it, get super duper nervous that I won't love it as much as the previous book or previous books. And so I do that thing where I'm like, actually, do you know what? I'll save that for a rainy day. It's rained loads since I've got this book in the house, and I still haven't got to it, and I really need to. So that's one that I would like to get to early next year, or whenever the mood takes. See, he's putting little dates on things that he shouldn't be. Then a novel that I haven't seen much chat about actually, and I've been quite surprised, but this has appealed to me. One, because I read the author's memoir and thought it was fantastic. Two, it's a queer historical novel, and actually I'm right in the mood for historical fiction at the moment. It's that time of year for me. So when I am heading to books, which is less, as I said at the moment, it does tend to be historical ones that I'm going for. But anyway, I digress. This is All the World Beside by Garrard Conley, who wrote the brilliant memoir, which of course is now completely gone out. My boy erased. I didn't even need to look it up. It came to me in time, or before I found it. So I thought that was such a stunning memoir, and I loved his writing. So I was really excited when I heard that he had a novel coming out, and I haven't got to it, and I really need to. And actually, this may fit into some winter vibes. Why have I done that? But this may fit into a video that I'm going to be doing about the sort of books I want to head to over the winter, because I know I am a winter denier, because I love autumn so much. I would like autumn to just carry on into spring or just be all year round, but winter is coming, and yeah, I think this could be the sort of book that I want to head to in winter, but there'll be a whole separate video about that, so I'll talk about that in due course. The only paperback that I have in this selection is Monstrillo by Gerardo, Sámano, Córdova, and this has been described as a brilliant queer horror novel about a woman whose son sadly dies, and she takes a little bit, I think, of his lung and grows a being / creature from that, and we follow on from there. I was so excited when I heard about this book. I don't know if I have it near me right now. I'm not going to, am I? Because I prepared poorly once again. But I was so excited about this book when I heard about it. I asked my lovely friend Julie to bring a copy over from America last November, and I still haven't read it. So shame on me. And sometimes I do need to have a little word with myself in public and be a bit accountable, because yeah, it's one that I've just again heard amazing things about. Also over here in the UK, it's out from a small indie press. I really want to be supporting more indie presses, especially one like Dead Ink, which is actually just down the road from me, well over the river. And so cross with myself about not having got to this one, but not so cross with myself that any of you need to say, Simon, don't be beating yourself up about it, because I'm not beating myself over the head with these books. I wouldn't want to damage them, but I am a bit annoyed with myself about it slightly. Then we have another book that I was super duper excited about, because I have read the author before, and her previous book for adults, so she also writes books for younger readers, I thought was incredible and was one of my absolute favourite books that I read that year too. This is Hey Zoey by Sarah Crossan, and she wrote, the title has got beehive in it. Why am I doing this? Why am I being like this? I'm not going to remember this one in time, am I? I'm going to have to go to the author's note. Here is the beehive. I was going to say behind the beehive, so I knew that I wasn't quite right. But anyway, her previous novel for adults, or her debut novel for adults, Here is the Beehive, was so stunning. It was about a woman who's having an affair with a man who dies, and so she has no one to talk about her grief to, and it's so haunting and just, oh, gorgeous. This is something completely different sounding, but I just love the sound of it, frankly. And this is Hey Zoey, as I've said, and it's about a woman who one day discovers in the garage a sex doll that her husband has, and starts a sort of friendship or communication with it. And that to me sounds like incredible. So why have I not read this yet? Why? Because I'm an absolutely naughty sausage, that's why. A book that I hadn't got on my list of books I was most excited for in 2024 until I started hearing from over in Australia these rave reviews here and there about it. It is actually coming out in the UK next year, so I think that's one of the reasons that I have maybe parked it a little bit, because I'm like, oh, I'd rather read it when it's out here, because then I can have more conversations with people about it. But, you know, silly sausage. But yeah, this has had some absolutely rave reviews from people that I really trust over in Australia, both on Bookstagram and on BookTube, and it is A Language of Limbs by Dylin Hardcastle, and this is meant to be an incredible queer love story set in Australia, I think in the 1970s, yes. And it looks at the AIDS epidemic, it looks at Australia and its homophobia, I believe, which to me always seems super odd, because as a kid growing up, I always saw like Australia as the queer mecca, probably because of Kylie, actually, if I'm honest. Anyway, yeah, I have been so keen to read this because so many people that, like I said, I really trust the opinions of in Australia have absolutely raved about it, that, yeah, need to get to it. But it is coming out in the UK next year, so let's see if I read it in the lead up to it being out. Another author who I have loved all the previous works of, and who I am triply, quadruply, ridiculously ashamed I've not read this yet, because I have an acknowledgement in this book, is Elizabeth Macneal, and this is her third novel, The Burial Plot. And not only all of those things combined to make me feel dreadful I've still not read this, but also the fact that it's set in a cemetery, and I used to be a tour guide at Highgate Cemetery, and I love everything cemetery-ish, without that sounding weird. So the fact that I've not headed to this, which is all about Victorian cemeteries, and I had a walk with Elizabeth around a cemetery as she was sort of beginning to plot this book, and had a chat with her about symbolism and all that kind of stuff. Shame on me. I really need to get to this. And actually, out of the 12 that I have said, oh, I probably won't get to this year, this is the one that I would most like to head to, if not before the end of the year, but definitely at the start. I was going to say before the new year starts, the same thing, but definitely at the start of next year, because appalled with myself, appalled. I think it is that nervousness though, because I really loved her previous novels. And it's interesting though, that said, sometimes I do think it is about reading the right book at the right time, because I've not long read Jessie Burton's The House of Fortune, and that came out quite a few years ago. It's the sequel to The Miniaturist, and I had mainly saved it for a rainy day, but then happened to, and I'm not suggesting that like I need to go and sit and read this in a cemetery in London, particularly not in the Victorian era, because I wouldn't be able to do that, but I did read The House of Fortune in Amsterdam, and that kind of gave it an extra flavour, and I think in a weird way I had been saving that for that, without knowing when I would go back there. Weird, random, weird. Anyway, an author I haven't read before, because this is their debut, but has a quote on the cover but from one of my absolute favourite authors, is Alan Murrin, and this is The Coast Road, which is set in Ireland, I think before divorce became legal, or around the time that it was being debated. And we follow, I believe, two women going through very different things at that time. Sarah Winman has said on the cover of this book, moves between rage, forgiveness and hope, a stonkingly good novel. If Sarah Winman, one of my absolute favourite authors and indeed one of my favourite people, is saying that this is a stonkingly good book, why the stonk have I not read it? What a silly stonking sausage. How many times have a sherry, because it's festive, but have a sweet treat every time I've said sausage in this video so far. Don't have a sausage every time I've said, so moving on, let's all move on. But yeah, I am a silly stonking sausage, because again, this is another one that I've only heard amazing things about, and one that I really wanted to, I don't know, get to, but also I think I really have a passion, sounds a bit wrong, but I do love to support amazing debuts. But that's maybe a whole different conversation for another video. But yeah, I'm cross with myself that I've not read this sooner. But that's the theme with this video, and maybe actually that's when you should have a tweet. No, we're not tweeting anymore. We're over that. We're all over blue sky now. But maybe you should have a sweet treat every time I say I'm cross with myself, and maybe I should too, although I'd be high off the sugar probably. Moving on to a novel that is another debut, and one that I got super duper excited about because it looks at one of my absolute favourite things in literature, and that is when cultures come together and they sort of collide, they clash, they merge, they meld, they riff off each other, they intermingle and all that kind of stuff. And this sounded phenomenal. It's Cinema Love by Jiaming Tang, and I believe this is set in New York. It says, for over 30 years, Old Second and his wife Bao Mei have cobbled together a meagre existence in New York City's Chinatown. But unlike other couples, these two share an unusual past. And I know there's a queerness, and I know it centres around an old cinema where queer films were played and men would meet each other. And because of all of that, with that, like I said, the whole cultures coming together, them sort of colliding, them merging, and with all of the queerness going on in the background, and it being a historical queer novel too, because I think this is set in the 1980s. There we go. Yeah, I would like to head to this because I think I'll get both that cultural cauldron, as it were, and also that queer history, which I'm really, really seeking reading more of. So yeah, I think that's going to be an absolute banger when I read it. I think this is the book that I probably mentioned the most on the channel this year and still not got round to reading, I think. Partly because I predicted it for pretty much every prize this year. That's The Night Alphabet by Joelle Taylor. And again, another book that I'm just really, really surprised that I haven't read, because the premise of this sounds so incredible. It's about someone who goes to have, I think it's a tattoo that joins all the other tattoos on their body, or it's the last tattoo, or the last tattoo they've got space for. I don't know, because I've not read it, but I've heard lots of things about it. But it's definitely about someone going to a tattoo parlour. They've already got loads of tattoos. And as they are having a tattoo done, how many times can I say tattoo, let alone sausage or cross with myself? But as they're having this tattoo done, they talk about all the other tattoos they already have on their body and when they had them done. And some of them, I believe, are from, well, obviously the past, but also some are from the future. And that whole sort of synopsis and idea just sounds incredible. So why the blinking blinkers if I not blinking read it? Now, this next book wouldn't necessarily, for those of you who have followed me while I've been on BookTube, but before that, both on the podcast that I used to do and the blog that I used to have, if you've been around that length of time, this book will be a surprise to you, because as I was saying, it doesn't sound like a very me book, because it's a book set on boats. This is Saltblood by Francesca de Torres, and I have always... There's a few things in fiction that I'm not a big fan of. Books set on boats is one, because in my head I'm just like, how long are we going to be on this boat? It's going to be really boring. I don't enjoy going on boats anyway. Also, the sea is both enthralling, well, not just both. The sea is enthralling, stunning, but absolutely funking terrifying. Like, what is below you? You have no idea. And that scares the seaweed out of me. And so I've always avoided books set on boats. However, I read Kate Moss's The Ghost Ship last year and absolutely blinking loved that. And actually, I need to read The Map of Bones, which is the final in the quartet of books that she's written around the Joubert family chronicles. I know why I've put off reading that one, because I don't want the series to end, even though I know, well, I've heard rumour from Kate, so therefore I guess I know that there's a new series that she's working on that's going to come out hopefully next year. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. So, Saltblood, the reason that this has appealed to me so much is because it's a, I believe, queer love story set on a boat based around, I think, two actual pirates, female pirates, which The Ghost Ship by Kate Moss was also about. And I think they're very, very different. But what is interesting to me sometimes is how I'll read one book and then have that real, like, oh, I have to find more books like it. I have to have more books of that ilk, I'm going to say. I don't know where the word ilk came from. I've not used it for a long time, but I like it. But yeah, I wanted to find more books of that ilk. And then I heard about Saltblood, was absolutely blown away by that blinking cover, requested this, naughty minx that I've therefore not read it, and that's something that I really need to focus on next year. Like, I have to say, I think this year I've requested a total of maybe 12 books, and I have read most of them. But going forward, if I've requested a book, just like if I buy a book in hardback, I want to read it within a certain amount of time of it arriving within the house. But that's for next year, not for this one. But yeah, I really wanted to read this one, and I haven't. But because I think I'm in that sort of historical fiction mood, maybe it's almost time for this. Sorry, I just did a dreadful sniff then. I'm a bit, what's it called? What they're called, those bits. I'm a bit sinusy. Anyway, yeah, really want to get to that one, and I really want to zig a cigar. Penultimately, but the last of the novels that I have wanted to get to this year and haven't, although actually looking around the room, there are many more that I could mention, but these are the ones that came out in 2025, is The House of Broken Bricks by Fiona Williams. And all year I've wanted to read this. It came out in January. I got it last year. I held off reading it even though I was super excited for it, because I was like, no, you need to read books the year they come out. Where did that rule come from? I mean, I suppose it's because if I read a book too far in advance, I feel like I haven't got any of you lot to talk to about it. And that's, for me, one of the joys of the bookish bits of the internet, is having a chat about books, whether you love them, whether you hate them, whether you feel similar, different, in between, all that stuff. And so I think I'm always like a bit like, oh, I don't want to have like be talking to the void about a book, I guess. And when this arrived, it would have been like 4 months out, maybe 5. And so I would have had quite a while until people read. But at the same time, I know how important pre-orders are. And also, I'd really like to be shouting about books that are coming ahead sooner, but at the same time, there's part of me that's like, I really want to focus more on backlist books. So lots of stuff is going through my brains every time, I only have one, my brain every time a book arrives. And I think this book therefore fell through the cracks of my reading this year. I was going to say my reading pavement, what am I talking about? But it fell through the cracks a bit, and I missed it because I had sort of put it off and then got swept up in this year's reading. I will say shout out to Mercedes, because she has mentioned this book a lot and has almost got me to read it several times this year. And actually I will say the same of West Kirby Bookshop, because it was one of their books of the month earlier this year. But yeah, haven't got around to it, have meant to. And the reason I should say that I've been excited about this book is it deals with Black lives in a rural space, which can quite often be quite a difficult space in which for Black people to live. Rural spaces are predominantly white. And I also really like reading about, how can I describe it? Say, for example, and this isn't a novel, but Mike Parker's On the Red Hill, I loved hearing about the queer experiences in rural spaces that you don't get to hear about. And yeah, there's something about that ruralness and the nature of it, and how if you feel an outsider, you can feel both more attached to the earth but also more distant from it and people. Wow, we've got deep there, but I have got to the bottom of what I'm intrigued for by it. That I've wanted to read this for that reason. So last but certainly not least, it's just that her surname is last in the alphabet of these books, is a short story collection. I haven't picked any non-fiction because non-fiction isn't generally my thing, but I would like to read more of that next year. Can you tell at the moment I'm really thinking of what I want to do with my reading next year? Maybe I just need to have a bit of a break over Christmas and not be analysing my reading and just see what happens. Maybe that's why my reading is winding down and why I've headed to a few sort of more backlists. Well, actually, no, what I've been really doing, apart from reading The House of Fortune while I was away, is, and this is a horrible term, but mopping up 2024, because there are a few books that I've started in 2024 that I've not finished, and I would like to finish them before the year is through. That could be a whole different video, and maybe it's something I'll do on Patreon, who can say, because I've got all of my video slots for the rest of the year sorted. But I digressed for far too long again. The short story collection that I really meant to head to this year has been Naomi Wood's This Is Why We Can't Have Nice things. I read the title story when it was up for the BBC short story competition and indeed won and thought it was fab. I'm also a big fan of Naomi Wood's writing. I have read 2 of her 3 novels. That's something that I need her to then next year. The Hiding Game, I can see it. It's not hiding, it's on my shelves. But yeah, I think her writing is brilliant. We once also had a fig roll fight on the internet. I mean, imagine. You probably are imagining that now, maybe. But yeah, I have been meaning to get to this, and as I have also discussed quite a lot this year, been meaning to get to more short story collections. So again, that's something that I'm going to hopefully do more of next year. That's something else. You should have had a sweet treat every time I said, what is it I've gone on about overly? Sausages. I've gone over about crossing myself, books that I've meant to read, and plans for next year, or more that I'd like to do next year. Anyway, there we go. That's the last of the official 12 with those potential bonus 2 books that I am shocked that I haven't got to this year because I meant to. I would love to know in the comments down below if you've read any of these and loved them. If you've read them and not loved them, don't tell me that right now because I'm excited about them. They're books that I'm really keen to get to in due course. I didn't put a time on it then. I'm learning. But I would really, 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 really love to know any books that you are quite shocked that you haven't got to this year because you really, really thought you would. They don't have to be books that came out this year. It could be just books in general that you've been meaning to get to all year. And I'd love to know why as well in the comments down below. That's it from me. Let's keep the conversation going in the comments down below. Wow, I am like a parrot, a repetitive parrot today. It's ridiculous. But yeah, let's keep the conversation going on the comments down below. If you'd like more savage shenanigans, there will be a video coming on Sunday. But until then, you can head to my Instagram, my Blue Sky, my Patreon. There's also my wish list because Christmas is coming in the links down below. And yeah, I will see you in another video very, very soon. Thank you as always for watching. I hope you're reading something fab. And yeah, bye.